Hope everybody's doing well. That's right. It's another Wednesday afternoon and time for another edition of the Online Dinner Party where we bring in great guests and we learn all kinds of interesting information about them and see what they're going on in their world. I know today I'm getting ready for an exciting weekend of work at the Hayti Heritage Center, or the Cultural Arts Center that I work at. We're going to have Melissa Harris Perry speaking on Saturday. And then on Friday will be Mike Wiley talking about his work in the arts and activism and all along those lines in a conversation that's part of the Keenan Institute and everything like that. So definitely that's going on. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on in the world, whether that's world conflicts or whether that's what's going on in sports. Because I did see that Venezuela actually beat the United States in the World Baseball Classic and all along those lines, the WBC. And that took place on yesterday. And of course, a lot of people are excited about college basketball, hoping that their team will make a run for the championship. My team will not be making a run for the championship. It had a very bad year, but I did learn that both of the guards will be making a return. So even though Marquette had a troubling year this year, it was good to hear that Nigel James, who was the Big East Rookie of the Year, as well as Adrian Stevens, his roommate, will be making a return trip and will try to make a run back and maybe have more success as they're going to have some assistance from some of the people that are coming in. Because I think there are 3 red shirts on that team and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. NC State did not make it out of the Final Four in, or however they call that thing, and all along those lines, because there are a couple of teams that are trying to make it to the final 64, and NC State was playing Texas and lost by a point. So they're just down the road in Raleigh and did not have much luck in that sense. I got to find out who else won and also decide if I'm going to do some picks this year. I usually do, sometimes even in a paid pool and all along those lines. But I haven't heard of anybody doing a paid pool at one of my other jobs, which is the testing company and all in that space. But I'll find out from folks what they've got on their mind and if they're going to be doing anything along those lines as well. So we're going to find out if that's the case or not the case. But I've got Nelson Aspen with me and everything like that. And Nelson's got some rich history, and we're definitely interested in hearing about this rich history and what he's got going on in his world and all along those lines, because he's actually done some work in the entertainment field. I've been an entertainment reporter, got these lovely books out and everything in that space. Harlan has always given me great guests and always glad to have the ones that he provides me and all in that space. But I know you've got some exciting things going on in your life, and you had the pleasure of working with some people that I have a great deal of respect for, because I'm a big fan of Jamie Lee Curtis and some other people that you've worked with as well. So definitely glad to have you here, Nelson. So can't wait to hear more about this book and what you've got going on. And by the way, are you a sports fan? And is your team in the tournament? Because my team did not make the tournament. I think we were like 10-20. We had a very bad year, even though we did upset Connecticut in one of the last games of the year in terms of regular conference play and everything like that. So they came to play that game, but they had some major defeats during the course of the year. So it was a troubling year for us as alumni.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here, and it's an honor. And I'm a casual baseball fan. I was very into the Dodgers during the 22 years that I lived in Los Angeles. And then when I moved back here to New York City, where I am now, I moved back full-time in 2012. I ended up at Joe Torre's birthday party. And Joe, I had known from when he was with the Dodgers, and he'd always extended very generous things for me. You know, I was interviewing players on the field, and I was always at the games. But when I moved back to New York, I sort of lost interest. If I couldn't have my Dodgers, and with the time change, it was not conducive to watching the games every day. So I sort of fell out of favor. And I ran into Joe here in New York at a bowling alley where he was hosting his birthday party. And I said, Joe, what am I going to do? What team am I going to root for in New York? The Yankees, it seems so on the nose. It's too easy to like the Yankees. But if I go for the Mets, I'm always going to be disappointed. What do I do? And he said, well, Nelson, I have an idea for you. You can stay a Dodgers fan because they came from Brooklyn. So he didn't take the time difference into account. It's not easy to be a Dodgers fan when you're living in New York City.
No, that's not easy to be a Dodgers fan. Well, I have become a fan of a sport that is not necessarily a North Carolina sport, but I have become a fan. A friend of mine has gone. He thinks that in some ways he and his wife may be the Lucky Charms, and they did win a Stanley Cup. But, it's kind of weird having hockey in North Carolina. But we've had it now for a couple of decades now, and they've actually done well and actually made a run last year toward the championship, and they're expected to do well again this year. So we'll see whether that's the case or not the case. But Florida won it. I think that was last year. So some of these warm weather places are doing well in a sport that traditionally has been cold weather.
Hey, if Israel can compete in the Olympics with a bobsled team, anything is possible. That was Shul running. That was amazing.
That was amazing. And they competed again this year. And I think Haiti had a team. And there were a couple of other folks that had teams as well. So did you ever get a chance to talk to the folks from the Jamaican bobsled team?
No, I didn't. But they are certainly legends. My field of expertise was the entertainment industry, still is the entertainment industry. But I was an avid marathoner. I ran 20 marathons over the course of maybe 10 years. Still, I'm an avid runner. But as far as professional sports, really, other than baseball, I didn't follow any. But as a reporter, I was covering the Oscars and the Golden Globes and every movie premiere. I was talking to every celebrity under the sun. I was flying around to different junkets all around the world. But that becomes, after a while, just another day at the office. So I would enjoy when I would get to report non-show business stories. Like, for example, there was an Australian player on the Dodgers named Trent Oeltjen, and having an Aussie on the team was a novelty. So that was an instance where I got to sort of combine show business with a little bit of sports. Catherine Switzer, the great female marathoner, she was the first woman to complete the Boston Marathon. Famously, they didn't let women in the race, and she registered with only her initials. This is how times have changed. And the race director tackled her on the course. There's a famous photo of him tackling this woman for having the nerve to run in his marathon. And she is still out there running, and she's interviewing figures like that is always a treat for me.
That sounds like a great treat. One of my great fantasies, and maybe you can tell me how I can accomplish it, because I know that at the age of 64, it's not going to happen and everything like that. But I know you covered the Golden Globe, you covered the a number of other great award shows and everything like that. And I know that historically, I've always said that I wanted to do, because I do some event planning and I do other things as well. I've always said that I wanted to do the Super Bowl party, like the Super Bowl halftime. I know that there are other parties as well, but the Super Bowl halftime. And I've always dreamed of having some role. It could be a minor role in either the Oscars or the Golden Globe and everything, because I am an event planner. And actually, me and some friends of mine, we have an agreement with the Apollo of New York, where you are and everything. And for 10 years, we took last year off. Hopefully we'll come back this year. We had an agreement where we ran an Apollo-like show, complete with the log, complete with our own Sandman, complete with our own rotating Kiki Shepherds and stuff like that. And I was the host of that. And our winners got carte blanche. So they got to jump the line and not have to stand in those long lines like you usually have to do in New York to get the chance to interview and get on the show. And a few of them actually made it on the show and everything like that. So we had that agreement with the great Apollo Theater and everything
Which
like that.
Which is directly right outside my window is if you were here, I'd let you look out the window and you would see the marquee to the Apollo. It's directly across the street from me. And they're actually closed for their first renovation in 100 years right now. So, but they have a new theater right next door. They own the property next door, and they've opened a new theater there as well. But next time you're in New York, we'll hopefully by then the Apollo Theater will have reopened, and we'll go see Amateur Night at the Apollo. And everything connects to show business. You talk about the Super Bowl. Well, the Super Bowl halftime show is one of the biggest show business stories of the year. Always, it always is. Everybody has a connection to that. And the same thing, with the Apollo. The first time I ever set foot in the Apollo was to interview Chadwick Boseman. Okay. And it was unforgettable to be sitting on the stage of that famed, iconic theater with Chadwick Boseman. It was when he was doing the James Brown biopic. And so I was interviewing him about that. So my motto is just say yes to everything. You'll have the most amazing experiences if you just sort of go with the flow, say yes to everything, and see what happens.
You got to say yes to everything, and all along those lines, you mentioned Chadwick and everything like that. I know that one of the main concerns that people have in society is prostate cancer, and that's actually what I think was the cause of his death and everything along those lines. So, did you get a chance to talk to him at all about his health issues, or was your interview with him before those health issues?
It was before, but no one really, up until the end, no one was really aware of his health issues, which in a way it's kind of refreshing to come across a celebrity that doesn't advertise every single bit of their private lives on social media. So I definitely respect when there are stars who keep a modicum of discretion about their private lives and keep it private.
Yeah, that's a great advice. I know that you said that I'm not sure which Jackie you were talking about, whether it was Jackie Collins or which Jackie it was, but I know that was your writing mentor, and they tutored you on to use a real name and when to use a fake name. And I love this advice. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty handling cash. Books don't sell themselves, which we know is very much the case, and don't shy away from the sex scene. So tell me about this mentor and everything along.
Well, it's funny because I've written 12 books now, but the as far as Jackie Collins goes, I have a trilogy of books, the Dancing Between the Raindrops series.
Right.
The first one chronicles my life in New York City from 18 to 28. The second one chronicles my 22 years in Los Angeles and my rise to the arguably the top of my field as an entertainment reporter. And then the final in the trilogy, which just came out now, is the aftermath, the happily ever after, if you will. Mm-hmm. But Jackie, I first met, I was in my 20s, maybe late 20s, living in Los Angeles. And you do a lot of survival jobs, but it's the survival jobs that make you A, an interesting person, right. B, give you the contacts that you end up going on to using and exploiting in your career, and 3, it gives you great stories. So there I am in a bookstore doing my survival job selling books, and a limousine pulls up outside the Borders bookstore. Out of the limousine comes Jackie Collins, the one and only, the highly recognizable, dramatic beauty of Jackie Collins, and she comes striding into the bookstore. She marches over to the fiction section with a pad and pen, and she takes inventory of her titles. She turned a few, if you see the books on the shelves like this, they don't get as much attention as if you turn them face out. So she was going through the books and she was turning them face out, and she was making a list, and then she walked over to the manager and she told the manager which ones were low and which ones he had to order. And then she left the store, got into her car, and drove away. A few years later, I was reporting then, and I ran into her, and I told her this story and how impressed I was by her taking action as a businesswoman and doing that. And so began our mentorship relationship, because she said to me, Nelson, if you're going to write a book, what's the point of writing it if no one buys it? You have to sell your book. You may take someone out for an expensive dinner, but when it comes time to buy the book, they've got to buy the book. And you have to be unafraid to make change, like working a lemonade stand. If they give you a 20, you got to make change, and don't be afraid to sell the book. So when I started writing the Dancing Between the Raindrops series, I took her other advice to heart, which was to always put a bit of sex into your book, or maybe not a bit, maybe quite a bit, because she said, even if someone doesn't enjoy that kind of material, they will want to read it just so they can say, I don't like that. Which is actually very true, I have found. And some people love it. Some people are won over by it. They go, wow, I didn't know it could be so
I'm a fan of the author that does those kind of books. I'm a fan of a couple of authors that do those kind of books, because I was a fan of Jackie Collins, but I was also a fan of Zane. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Zane or done any work with Zane, but also Nina Fox. But Zane is an African-American erotic writer that's been out there for decades and everything like that. But she's definitely one of those folks that writes about erotica in the sense that, to some degree, some people might put Jackie Collins in the same category.
Well, yes. I mean, the romance novel industry is huge. My books are not romantic, but they're full of celebrity gossip and celebrity stories. And yes, a healthy dose of adult situations. But that's life. Life is full of adult situations.
Life is definitely full of adult situations. Speaking of adult situations, you had the pleasure of covering Nicole Kidman's wedding to Keith Urban. So, what was that like, and how was that? How did you get that coverage assignment and everything like that? Because that sounds like a prime assignment for somebody to get and everything like that. And of course, a lot of people are fans of Nicole Kidman as well as the country legend Keith Urban.
Yeah, and they said it wouldn't last. Well, they were right. Nobody saw that divorce coming. But it's interesting because I was working for an Australian morning show with great success, and I was reporting every single day. I was on the air for 4 hours a day reporting as part of the morning show. But I was reporting from Los Angeles via satellite. You want your Hollywood guy in Hollywood, after all.
Right.
And I had not been to Australia to enjoy the perks of my fame, but they called and said, well, Nicole and Keith are getting married. We would like you to come down and be our man on the scene. So I went to Australia, and it was a real lesson for me in how to handle myself professionally, because when I went down there, they installed me at the same hotel on the same floor with Keith's family, ostensibly to spy on them. They wanted me to be able to have firsthand accounts of what was going on with the Urban family.
Right.
And I found it very unpalatable and decided, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cover the wedding, and I'm not going to spy on my fellow hotel guests. So the next day, they took me out with a camera crew to Nicole's house in Sydney. And the mission was, when she's pulling out of the driveway, to get her to look into the camera, to have some sort of interaction with Nicole Kidman. The hype, the Australians, they love their chosen few. They love Nicole. They were very excited about it. It was not a malicious kind of hunting, but it was still hunting. It was stalkerazzi like. So there I am, a guest in this country. They're pushing me out to her house, surrounded by press. There was media there from all over the world trying to get the shot. Well, the garage door goes up, and she's coming out of the garage, and they push me out of the car, and the cameraman is literally pushing me towards her car, saying, "Get her, get her, get her." And I was just appalled. But what was I to do? So everybody's screaming her name, Nicole, Nicole, trying to get her to look up. She was very shy. She was looking down. She looked absolutely miserable. And I'm literally pressed up against the car window. The cameraman is shoving me into the car window. And I thought, instead of saying her name, I'll say my name. And I said, it's Nelson. Because I figured if she's in Australia, she's watching me. Everybody watched that show in the morning. So if she was watching TV in the morning, she knew me. So I went, instead of saying Nicole, I said, it's Nelson. And she looked up, and we got this wonderful shot. And then as I made eye contact with her, I mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." And off she went. Then the next day I covered the wedding, and it was great. And I flew home with Naomi Watts and Nicole's kids, Connor and Isabella, the two kids she adopted with Tom Cruise. So we all flew home together, and we had that bonding experience, became friends. But the lesson I learned was, don't take those assignments. And it was good for me. It was a good learning experience for me. No harm, no foul, but it changed forever the way I would accept assignments.
Yes, it sounds like it would change that way that you would accept assignments forever in a day and everything like that. What was your impression of Australia? We have a gentleman that's on the network, Shaquille Latimer. He's involved in hedge fund work and involved in a lot of other things as well. But he is definitely a true Australian and everything like that, even though I think he's originally from one of the islands and everything like that. I'm trying to remember which island he's from, but he's definitely lived in his life in Australia and was involved in greyhound racing and a number of other sports like that and everything like that. But what was your impression of Australia?
Well, I worked for an Australian show for 20 years. So I thought they're going to carry me out in a pine box. I never thought that job would end, because it was 5 days a week or more, 4 hours a day or more. And I was raised by Depression era parents, so my mentality is you never give up a paying job, no matter what, no matter you just, even if you're not happy, you don't give up a paying job. And I was happy, so why would I give it up? And then that's sort of the premise of the third Dancing Between the Raindrops book, The Happily Ever After, because I so closely aligned myself with my job that my job was my spouse. It was my livelihood. It was my everything. And there are two magic words that everyone should learn. That's showbiz.
Yep.
And sometimes, nothing is forever. And there was, as often happens in the television industry and many other industries, there were some forces at work, forces of darkness behind the scenes. So my happy job of 20 years finally came to an end. And yet, that's showbiz. So
That's
I
showbiz, yeah.
rallied, and guess what? I started writing books, and then I got married, and now, spoiler alert, I'm living happily ever after.
Living your happily ever after. Speaking of not living happily ever after, you had the pleasure of dealing with the deaths of some great heroes. I was definitely a big fan of Mork and Mindy and Robin Williams, and you had the pleasure of dealing with that, even though it's sad news and everything like that. But how was it like covering Robin Williams and Heath Ledger's deaths? Because I know that had to have been some serious trying times, just like the arrest of Hugh Grant had to be some trying times as well. But how were you able to deal with those stories?
Well, I find it a great honor when you can report on the passing of a legend, like a Robin Williams, a Heath Ledger, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's death dominated a year of my life. I was on the air for 7 hours live as the news of his passing unfolded. But then, there was the investigation into his death, the trial of Conrad Murray, there was the memorial, there was the funeral, there was what happens to the kids, there was what happens to Neverland. It really dominated a year of my life. The same with Whitney Houston, the same with any of the great stars, especially if it's tragic, like a Robin Williams or a Heath Ledger or a Whitney Houston. I mean, they're all tragic. But right. I find it a great responsibility. Betty White, she was my very first celebrity interview back in the early 90s. And I made my boss promise when the sad day eventuates that Betty White passes away, and I hope it's not for a long time, and it wasn't, I have to be the reporter. She and I were close. And you have to make sure that no matter what time of day it is, whatever day of the week it is, where I am, I have to be the reporter. And I had just moved into my house. I believe it was New Year's Eve day. Wow. And she passed away at the age of 99. And they called me right away. And I did it via Skype on my phone, but I did the report. And when you have a personal connection with a star, I did a film with Robin Williams back in the 80s. Called Seize the Day. So every time I would go to interview him, which I did several times, I would sit down in the chair, hello, shake your hand, and then I would start off with, we did a movie together, Seize the Day. And it was one of his personal favorites, although nobody ever saw it. It was a nothing kind of movie. But he had a personal affection for it. So that made our interview better. And that, for me, was the key with all my celebrity interviews, whether it's Julie Andrews or Demi Lovato. You have to find some personal connection. Their personal trainer, their chef, their third grade school teacher. And that's what makes an interview special.
No, that definitely makes an interview special and everything like that. Did you ever have the pleasure, and I'm asking for a reason, because I remember when he passed and everything, and I'm thinking that you were probably a kid, I know I was a kid when it happened, of interviewing any of the Elvis clan. Because I know when he passed, my grandmother, who was living at the time and started the first African-American library in Raleigh, North Carolina, we were at the Disney World and learned about the death as we came back from watching, hanging out as kids. My brother is 7 years younger than I am, so I was probably a teenager at the time, and I want to say, well, he might have been about 7 or 8 or something like that when Elvis passed away. And then, like I said, we were out there at Disney World, and when we came back, we turned on the TV and they were talking about Elvis's death. So I was wondering if you ever had the pleasure of talking to, say, the Priscilla Presleys or any of the other folks that were associated with the Presley family.
Very interestingly, and I'm old enough to remember Elvis's death too. We're not so far apart. I'll be 63 soon. So okay. I was invited to Graceland to cover, what was this? Oh, it was for Lisa Marie's, was doing an album this was not too long ago. She was she was releasing a new album of, it wasn't duets, but it was Elvis's gospel. It was gospel music that Elvis had sung, and
Right.
she was recording her version of it. I think there was one duet that she did posthumously with him, where they, like Natalie Cole
Natalie
did with
Cole.
Nat King Cole. It was
Right.
one. I think it was one of those situations. Anyway, so I go down to Graceland, and it was the day they were just finishing building a chapel on the grounds of Graceland. They had never had a chapel there before. And what was interesting was the Elvis wedding chapel in Las Vegas was so popular. I think Graceland wanted to capitalize on the wedding market. So they built a chapel. And literally, I interviewed Lisa Marie. It was the first time she'd ever walked into the chapel. It was brand new. They were bringing the benches in when I was standing there waiting to go in. It smelled of fresh paint. And I had this amazing interview with Lisa Marie, which meant so much to me, to be with the king's daughter. And then, of course, I fell in love with Graceland. I much prefer Memphis over Nashville. I've run the Memphis Marathon, but I've never run the Nashville Marathon. I was besotted with Memphis. And I begged the folks at Graceland, let me come back and do another story. So I went back at Christmas time and did a Christmas at Graceland story, which was wonderful. So then when Lisa Marie passed away, as you recall, it was just a day or two after her final appearance at the Golden Globe Awards when the Elvis movie came out.
Right.
And the world was, I want to say that was 2023, but the world was so shocked. We all feel like we grew up with Lisa Marie. And she had such a volatile life, not only as the daughter of the king of rock and roll, but then she was married to the king of pop when she was married to Michael Jackson, which still has people shaking their heads. But yeah, then I was able to give an obituary for Lisa Marie with context and talk about being in the chapel with her in her home. That Graceland was her home as well.
That was totally her home and everything like that. How important, because one of the places I work at, I kind of alluded to it earlier when we started this show and everything, is the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a converted church and it's a cultural arts center and everything like that. Just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And I've been working with them for about 25 or 30 of those 50 years and everything like that. But I was just wondering your take on historical venues, because there are a number of very important historical venues both in LA, and we kind of talked about the Apollo in New York, but I was just wondering your thoughts around historical venues and their importance to the entertainment landscape.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I've got the Apollo on one side of me, and I've got a place called the Firehouse Theater on the other side of me. And I live in a very modern, high-rise apartment building, but I'm right smack in the middle of Harlem. But we live side by side with history. And to me, those are my favorite kinds of cities. Los Angeles is, there's no, wasn't it Gertrude Stein who said, there's no there. And I had a wonderful 22 years in Los Angeles, and it gave me a lot of gifts professionally, but she was right. There is no there. One of my favorite cities for that is Dublin, Ireland, because Dublin was never touched by the war. It never got bombed out in World War II. So you have actually ancient buildings. Ancient history is in Dublin, right next to very modern, extraordinary architecture, and it lives side by side. And that's how I feel about it. I believe in historical preservation, but I also believe in progress. And I think that the two can live together.
No, they can definitely live together. There's no doubt about that and everything. I was just wondering, because you also had the pleasure, because I'm a fan of some of her politics as well as just her in general and everything like that. But sometimes we think of celebrities as not being that warm to like practical jokes and everything like that. But apparently you played a practical joke on Jodie Foster and maybe a couple of other practical jokes as well. So how did this work out, and how did you manage to pull a practical joke on the great Jodie Foster? And
she is great. She's one of my absolute favorites. And the hearkening back to what I was just saying about finding a personal connection to your interview subject makes for a better interview. So I knew that Jodie and I had a mutual friend. I'd seen her at some of these mutual friends' parties and things, but I'd never interviewed her. She wouldn't know me to see me on the street. But I had our mutual friend. I'm trying to look for a prop here. Pretend this is my phone. So as I was walking into the interview room to meet Jodie, I had arranged it with my friend to call me as I was going into the room. I mean, it's taboo to have a phone in an interview situation. And I'm walking into the room and it's going ring, ring, ring. And I'm like, oh, hold on a minute. I'm with Jodie Foster. And Jodie Foster's looking at me thinking, what the heck is this dude? I'm like, Jodie, it's for you. And I handed her the phone and it was our mutual friend. So that kicked off the interview in a very funny way, which was, it was great. It made my interview special, but it also created a camaraderie between she and I, and her and I. Is it her and I or she and I? Pardon my grammar. And then the next time I saw her, and the next time I saw her, she'd be like, "Ah, it's you again," and it made it special.
It sounds like it was very special and everything like that. Now, there's a artist that is very familiar to the people here in Durham, North Carolina, because she was part of a legendary movie here and everything like that. But I was wondering, what was it like talking to Susan Sarandon, another person that has some political leanings and everything like that? But what was it like talking to Susan Sarandon? Because a lot of people will know her and Kevin Costner as being the great love match in the movie Bull Durham, which is loosely based on the Durham Bulls, which is a franchise here in Durham, a minor league franchise and everything like that. So I was just wondering your take on Susan Sarandon.
She was great. She is such a renowned political figure, and she's so controversial with her politics that I did have a little hesitation about it. Like, oh God, is she going to get up on her soapbox and opine about something political, or can we, there's so much other stuff I'd rather talk about with her, especially for a morning news show. That's not appropriate. It's not right. And I have to say, she was delightful. She really was, which is funny now when I see coverage of her politics, I'm kind of like, oh, I wish she would show her more charming side, but that's important to her. And this is America, and she has every right to say whatever she wants to say.
Yeah, and speaking of charming, there is a gentleman that is very well known, is an icon. You interviewed a couple of icons, but what was it like talking to Dick Van Dyke? Because I do remember as a child being a fan of Dick Van Dyke. I was also a fan of Carol Burnett. Don't know if you ever talked to Carol Burnett, but definitely a fan of some of those variety type shows. I was a big fan of Laugh-In and everything like that. So what was it like talking to Dick Van Dyke?
Well, I write about it in The Dancing Between the Raindrops, The Hollywood Years. That's book 2 of the trilogy. But Dick played a very important role in my career, and he had no idea of how important a moment it was for me. I was reporting for a Canadian television show, and it would have been in the early 90s, and he was on Diagnosis Murder at the time. Remember the series Diagnosis Murder? And I was doing a set visit. And I was really just very new to the reporting game, and I couldn't even afford it. I had this secondhand car that didn't always start on the first try. I was lucky I made it out to the studio for the interview, and I got there, and I interviewed him on his lunch break. He just he was everything you wish Dick Van Dyke would be. He was. And what was remarkable to me, because I was still learning my way as a journalist and as a conversationalist. And what was amazing was, as I would speak, he would actually listen. And not all celebrities do that. He would listen so intently, so well, that he would then respond. And we actually had a conversation back and forth, which is not always the case. It's usually you ask a question, you get an answer. This was a conversation. When it was all over, I got back in my car, my putt. I'm lucky. I don't know how many times it took me to start it to get out of the studio lot, but I got out of the studio lot and I was driving on the 101 freeway back to my home in Hollywood. And I thought, this was the moment I realized I'm doing the right thing. I set out to be an actor. I got sidetracked in the fitness industry. It's easy to not be sure of where you fit when you're 18, 19, 25. But now here I was, and it was Dick Van Dyke that made me feel like I was on the right track doing the right thing.
Sounds like it. You mentioned the fitness industry, and I do remember Richard Simmons and, of course, a number of the women that were in the fitness industry as well. So what was it like being in the fitness industry, and how did that play into your Hollywood life?
You'll hear the sirens. I don't know if the microphone is picking up, but this is welcome to New York City. The sirens are going. So I also have church bells, so you take the bitter with the sweet. Fitness industry. When I was trying to break out on Broadway, I moved to New York when I was 17 years old and determined to be a Broadway actor. You have to do things. So one of my survival jobs was becoming an aerobics instructor. I went and got certified as an aerobics instructor. I knew I'd be a lousy waiter, but I thought being an aerobics instructor would be good. I became a very popular aerobics instructor, so much so that when I moved to Los Angeles, I kept up with the aerobics. Now I was training celebrities, and I had long flowing 1980s hair, and I had the bike pants showing off my very fit little bottom. And I was asked to train. We'll vet you. Would you please fly to London and train Princess Diana in that hot new workout, step aerobics? I was a very popular step aerobics instructor. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go to London. I'll teach Princess Diana how to step up and down. I went off to London, having been vetted. I was very excited. I mean, wouldn't you be excited to
totally
meet Princess Diana and sweat with her? So I get to London, and they crushingly informed me that instead of training Diana, they have decided I will train her trainer, and I will train the other staff members at the Royal Gym. So I'm like, well, that's all right. That's showbiz. But I was asked to be a guest on the morning show and demonstrate the princess's new workout. So I stuffed myself into those Lycra bike pants, brushed out my long flowing mullet, and I demonstrated the step for Britain. That appearance landed me my first morning show job permanently, and I did British morning television for 10 years before moving on to Australian morning television for 20 years. Much better time difference. But that's another example of you don't know where your opportunity is going to come from. Say yes. You don't think an aerobics career is going to turn into a TV career, but it did. You just don't know where your opportunities lie.
Well, speaking of saying yes, I'm gonna bring another friend of mine in really quickly. I think you'll enjoy her. She's a dancer and an artist from this area and everything. I think she spent some time in New York, if I remember correctly, but she can correct me if I'm wrong and all along those lines. But Adrienne Woods Valdez has definitely done a lot of work in the community and all along those lines. So looking forward to hearing her thoughts about a number of these things that we were talking about and all along those lines, because she usually does Women at Work, which is a celebration of women artists. And in the last 10 years, it's been at the Hayti Heritage Center, but this year it'll be at a different location, a variety of locations, I believe, and everything like that. And then hopefully we'll come back to the center and everything. So share a little bit. I'm talking to Nelson. Nelson is a longtime reporter of entertainment, and he's had the pleasure of interviewing everybody from Michael Jackson to Betty White to a number of other folks as well. So share a little bit about your story and where you came from. I believe it was New York, if I remember correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong.
So hi, Mark and Nelson.
Hello.
Nelson, we don't know each other personally, but I love hearing your story. And and I had a stint with aerobics, or sort of filling in. So I remember that time period was a Jane Fonda fashion wear. I was modeling her clothes in a department store. And so that brought back some fun, memories from that time. You had to be there. That was a time period you had to be there. So, but thank you, Mark. Yes, I'm Andrea E. Woods Valdez, and I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I moved to New York City right after I graduated from college. So most of my life was spent in Brooklyn there, and I'm a very, very proud of Brooklyn. When people say New York, I say Brooklyn. So I've been here for a little over 17 years now. So I've totally embraced Durham, and I have family from North Carolina ancestrally, 5 generations back. My family's from down here. Our family reunion is down here, but I didn't come to know North Carolina until I was an adult. So I'm in it, but I didn't, come up in this beautiful environment. So, yeah, those, being here. One of the first things I did was get connected to the Hayti Heritage Center when I moved here. I think in 2009. The Hayti has a reputation beyond Durham, and it's a designation. It's a go-to site. So even from New York, I was thinking, I hope someday I have a chance to be in that community. Not thinking that. I think Women at Work that I was co-producing with the Hayti. This is our would be the 9th year. We're doing something a little different because of the restructuring, but we made it through. Even COVID, we did online. I found some videos from that. We set up like a streaming in the performance hall, but people then were in their own homes. Christy Vincent Johnson was teaching a step class. So everyone was individually in different places. And the hostess, Kimberly McCrae, was at the Hayti. It was amazing that we made that happen. So being live, being with people, being in the spaces, being in action is a thrill.
Yeah,
Mark, you never would have guessed that a step class would be the theme of this episode.
You never can tell what the theme will be. I know one of the things that we talk about oftentimes is survival and all along those lines. So this is for both of you. How have you been able to maintain a life? You, Nelson, as an entertainment reporter, and you, Andrea, as a dancer and performer of your own right and an educator, because I know a lot of times people are saying, well, I got to work at DoorDash, I got to work at Grubhub, I got to do this and that, and can't really just make it on my art alone and everything like that. And you kind of alluded to it, Nelson, when you said it is show business. So it is a business aspect as well, but people forget the business aspect oftentimes. So at what point did you realize it was a business, and how did you get by without having to do the gig jobs? Or maybe you did have to do the gig jobs, because I know I've got like 3 or 4 jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was about 26, I'd been living in New York for 3 years, and I went to college. I had a 4-year BFA degree, and I was hustling like everyone else. I was doing house cleaning, I was babysitting, I was being a hostess in a restaurant, and whatever job. I handed out flyers on the street. I worked for a caterer to be the clean up dishes people, things at night so that you could always dance during the day. Like that was the main thing, to have time to rehearse if you were working with a company and dance. So the work was on the fringe of those hours. And I did that, and I was pretty much getting burnt out. And then, but during that time, I was always teaching. And that was something that my parents honored. When I went on tour, and I worked with Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane Dance Company. That's Bill in that picture back there, the black and white picture. I would come home from Brazil and Germany and Portugal, and my dad would say, well, do you have any teaching jobs coming up? I was like, oh. So, but teaching and working with young people, that is part of the secret. When young people come to you, it's like they make an investment in you. They say, I want you around me. And a relationship with, a creative, a scholarly, an artistic relationship with young people has to be mutual, because they know when the energy isn't good, when the wisdom isn't right, they know, and they'll turn away. So that's part of it, being around young people and making it through that 3-year hump. That was a big, long, hard 3-year hump, but it seasoned me. And when I got in a company, I was like ready to hit the ground running. And I lived in New York for 23 years, 23 very hard years. There was never a year where I say, oh, that was the easy year. That was the fun year. It was always, nose to the grindstone, very fulfilling. I got everything I wanted and needed, but it was, you could never like release the grip in order to be moving forward. And my life isn't like that now. I have a different kind of lifestyle, but I still have goals and things and aspirations. But teaching was the lifeline. And, I'm making my father and mother proud, but sticking to teaching while I was performing, while I was hustling, yeah, metaphorically speaking, like doing those odd gigs. And while I was at even the most successful part of touring, I was teaching the company. I was teaching company class. I would teach when we came home on our breaks, teach New Yorkers. I would guest artists at different universities. And one of the first, or not the first, but one of the strongest teaching residencies I had was at North Carolina. It was School of the Arts. Now it's University of the Arts. And that was a powerhouse class of students that came out of that time period. So that's what it is for me.
That makes sense.
To teach.
What about you, Nelson? Everything, and really quickly before I get to that, Nelson, I think just said that he's about my age, and meaning in the mid 60s, because I will hit 64 in July. But I think he said he just recently got involved in a marriage or relationship and everything like that. I know you've been in a long time relationship. Your husband is a great drummer and everything like that. Andrea,
he's a writer. He's a writer.
Right.
But he's from Cuba, so people automatically think he's a drummer, but he's a writer.
Right. But what advice would you give to this gentleman that is in a new relationship? Because y'all been together for a while and everything.
Give relationship advice?
Please. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Oh, I feel blessed. Yes. I found the this real kind of I don't even have like metaphors for the sincerity and fierceness of love that I have in my relationship. But that happened in my 40s. I'm 2 years younger than you. I'm not, I think I went through all of, the ups and downs, variations on the theme. And I think the recipes or the secrets are very simple. I mean, when you fall in love with someone, that's what you do. You fall in love, and the love should always be first. So you can be angry, but the anger can't be first. You could be frustrated, but the frustration can't be first. You could be sad, you could be disappointed, but those things can't be first. The love always has to come first. And even on my most, I have a very active, like reactionary, when things happen, I say something and I'm like always apologizing because just things, they just flip out of my mouth. But I have to do a lot of sometimes recall and try to slow it down. But the conversation in my head is still love first, Andrea, love first. And that's mutual. I don't have to work at it so hard, but that would be, what I would recommend. I don't think I've had a good track record until the 2000s. So I wouldn't give much more advice than that.
That makes sense and everything like that, but I just had to bring that up because I know that he just recently mentioned that earlier. By the way, his good friend, Joan Collins, and I don't know if you're Joan Collins' friend, with one of
Jackie.
his mentors. Jackie Collins. Jackie Collins was one of his mentors and everything like that. So I don't know if you're a Jackie Collins.
I love her. Yes.
Well, it's I will say, as far as romance goes, Los Angeles is a terrible place to try and fall in love. It's just not an ideal city for love. And boy knows I had a lot of fun trying. However, when I moved back to New York, I was 50 years old, and we didn't have apps when I lived in New York as a teenager. But when I moved back to New York at 50, we had apps. So I was having a grand old time, and a lot of that's in the book as well. But I was very much of the belief, after chasing romance for so many years, pardon the sirens, I was finally, at long last, alone but not lonely. I was having a hell of a good time being single. And the old cliche of when you're not looking for it is where you find it. That's exactly what happened. I was having so much fun being single that I was blindsided when love hit me in the face. And we've been together 12 years, married for 3. And it was the right time for me. Finding love at 50 was the right time for me.
That sounds like a New York story. That definitely sounds like a New York story.
That definitely sounds like a New York story. Speaking of New York stories and everything like that, definitely, Nelson, you also had the pleasure of working with some of the Saturday Night Live people and everything like that. So what was that like? Because I mentioned the prank that you played on Jodie Foster. Apparently, you also had some prank pulled on you by Tina Fey and Margot Robbie. And I know that Tina Fey is a Saturday Night Live alumni.
Yeah, when I went in to interview those two ladies together, and I was prepared for the interview. What I wasn't prepared for was, as soon as the cameras were rolling, they had this all cooked up that they were going to turn the tables on me by interviewing me. I think whatever the project they were doing, one of them was playing a reporter, so that was their joke. And Margot, of course, being Australian, knew me from Australia, so she was trying to do that, and it was fun. It was a fun little gimmick to be the subject of the interview as opposed to being the interviewer. And as Andrea mentioned, her own history with Jane Fonda workout gear, I should point out that when I did move to Los Angeles, I worked for Jane Fonda's workout studio in Beverly Hills. And so Jane was my employer, although, you'd see her coming and going, but I didn't know her until maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. She and Robert Redford did their fourth and final film together. And I went in to interview both of them. I mean, two legends, right? But when I sat down with Jane, I said, Jane, and that's when I was able to say, do you remember me? You were a great boss. Do you remember I worked for you? And she was so flummoxed. And we got into a whole conversation about her aerobics studio back in the day. And that, to my point, being, take whatever job you need to take to make ends meet, or just because you have to or because you can. Take these jobs. Who would have thought that job on Robertson Boulevard in Beverly Hills in 1986 or whatever it was would pay dividends 35 years later in a room with Jane Fonda? You just don't know when these things. Keep a journal, because you don't want to lose track of these things.
Yeah, you never know when they might come back. Go ahead, Andrea.
That's so well said. And a lot of people are afraid of that kind of advice. And I have someone who every time something happens with me that's, in a positive direction, will say, you're so lucky. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, yeah, luck is a part of it, but the work ethic and the willingness to do what isn't the big shiny thing, I would never degrade myself or anything, but you have to take those steps that are moving you toward your goal. And some people are only thinking about the goal and only thinking like a time is money kind of these sort of tropes that take people to the end of something, but don't speak to the process. And the process that you're going to go through is not linear. It's not like stair steps. It's not always a step forward. You might have to go a little side to side sometimes. But that ability to see through something toward your goal, to see it as an opportunity, is something that kind of
journal. You got to write it down every day. I've been keeping these journals for 10 years, maybe longer. Just write down things. It doesn't have to be every day, but being cognizant of.
So speaking of being cognizant and everything along those lines, how important do you think it is? Because you kind of alluded to it, Andrea, and everything. Because I think that sometimes we forget that the job, particularly in show business, means that you have to do a lot of different jobs and everything. Some of my best friends are also folks that have worked, even though they might be the actor or the star, but they've also done some work as grips. Because I'm actually impressed. I know that Coco McMillan, who does a show here on the network, and she used to work with Gerald Levert and everything like that. She talks about the notion of literally having to pull up the cables after the show, and she was the background vocalist for Gerald Levert and everything like that. So how important do you think it is for entertainers to realize that they might have to do some less than spectacular jobs?
Well, it's important. That's what makes a well-rounded, interesting person. I mean, doing one thing is only interesting once. If that's the whole concept of a Renaissance man, which now I guess we say a Renaissance person, a Renaissance individual. But it's about enriching your life with a lot of skills and a lot of talent. And you have to find out what you're good and not good at. I can teach a hell of a step class, but I can't sink a basket. Everybody should know what their skills are, and you won't know until you try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and every field also is so multifaceted. I do remember when I was 26 and I was asked to dance with Bill T. Jones. I was being a bus person in a restaurant, and I was teaching 5-year-olds up in Westchester and living in Brooklyn. So if you know the territory of New York, that's a very long 3 transportation trip. And then at night, I was still taking dance class during the day. And I was finally able to go in and tell my supervisor in the restaurant that, starting next week, I won't be here anymore. And in the back of the restaurant where you make the coffee, like the station where the bus person usually has to do stuff, I just remember saying to myself, making a vow, I won't do anything unless it's related to dance anymore. When I walk away from this espresso machine and take this towel off my shoulder, I will never be back in this environment again. And I held true to that. So that meant maybe teaching summer camp. It meant maybe performing in small venues when I wasn't in a company. It meant being in the company and teaching class and doing extra things when we came home on the breaks. But I stayed in the trajectory, in the path, my path of dancing, education, creativity. Right now, I'm developing an opera. I'm writing and composing the opera, and I'm co-writing it with a friend. I'm writing the libretto, and she's doing the choreography so that I can work my composer's hat. But I'm staying, I will not go out from that. I work in video production, but it's with Dance for the Camera. And I could do other things, but I know where I want to be. I know where my passion is. And so I don't feel like I got to run here, I got to run there, I got to do this, I got to do that. It's great to have many skills, but you should be, like Nelson said, like, know your skill set and where you excel and where people are going to get excited about you, because you don't want to always be in everything. You want to, those things support you getting to the thing you love to do.
Well, speaking of that, and this is both of you, one of the things I talk about often on this show is the notion of the imposter syndrome. It sounds like both of you are very self-confident, but I know in my own situation, both relationships and jobs, I have talked myself out of those jobs and in relationships because I was having that inner voice conversation that we all have and everything like that. So both of you seem very self-confident and probably haven't dealt with the imposter syndrome all that much and everything like that. But
you haven't asked me to do math. I wouldn't be so confident if you asked me to do math.
You would be surprised. And, all of those things like fake it till you make it. Like, we know how to work that. We know how to work that phrase, till you get what you need to get. Or sometimes you have to put yourself in a position where you're not the most secure because in your spirit that you're going to grow, that you're going to move into that. Working in music, I've been a percussionist. I didn't go to music school the way I did dance since I was a kid. That was part of my adult life, coming into percussion and performing and being on stage and singing with bands and things like that. So I've actually put myself in what I call maybe your beginner's mind, where you start something new and fresh. And that's been going on for a couple of years till I got to the place where I had to start to claim it and say, you're starting to produce, you're making work, you're teaching in some aspects, you're developing something, people are listening to you. Claim this thing. Stop, being in the background, like, oh, I dabble, in music, push it forward. But imposter syndrome is the biggest threat. It's always there. You have the little thing on your shoulder that's saying, you don't know what you're doing. Everyone else knows, but you don't know. Who are you fooling? Blah, blah, blah. And you have to take that thing and go like, psh, and then close the window on it. And it's out there going,
sometimes you just got to slap it and everything along those lines. Slap it. Nelson, what's the best advice you've been given from some of these various entertainers that you've interviewed? I'm thinking you've probably interviewed close to 1,000, and we've mentioned some of them like Michael, and I think he might be the even interviewed Prince back in the day. But what's the best advice that you've gotten that you can recall from a celebrity?
I don't think I've ever gotten any good advice from a celebrity. Mother and dad, yes. Celebrities, not so much. However, I will say I prefer interviewing the mature stars like a Clint Eastwood or a Julie Andrews, an Anthony Hopkins, because they have no filters at that stage of their lives. They're confident with themselves. They know who they are, and they're not so self-aware the way that a younger star may be. That they're able to relax and give you a good interview. They also, the older folks, have the better stories to tell. The older you get, the better stories you have. So I think that is the lesson I have learned. I love getting older. I don't love everything that's associated with it necessarily. And ageism is a very real factor in television. Yeah. However, the hair isn't there anymore. But I love life, and I love my age. I don't have any issues with my age. People are, you really might want to pipe down about your age. I'm like, are you out of your mind? I love my age.
Yeah, you've earned it. We've earned it.
60s is a great age and everything like that. And sometimes it can be the new 40s or the new 30s, because I love when they have those phrases about what age is the new this or the new that and everything like that. But Nelson, I do have to ask you, because I have run across some celebrities, and I'm sure that Andrea has as well, that most of the time they are very nice, but there are some that you're sitting there going like, you need to put a check on yourself. I won't name any names, but I used to go to the National Black Theater Festival, and there were a couple of them that were very much nice folks. I loved Antonio Vargas, who was the Huggy Bear, but there was others that I won't name that had a little bit of an attitude.
I'm sorry, I missed the last couple of words of that because of the siren going.
I heard the siren in the background. Yeah. I was just wondering, how do you do in your interviews? How did you deal with those that had a little bit of an attitude? Because we do know that sometimes celebrities have a little bit of an attitude. So I'm sure there were some. There are those that you featured in the book that were wonderful, but I'm sure there were others that you were sitting there going like, "Can this interview end?"
Yes, as well as an interviewer, you're usually fighting for more time. You want as much time as possible. Right. However, there are certain celebrities where you just can't wait to get out of the room, and they're rare. I would say that might be just 1%. Right. Most of them are terrific, and they know how the story goes. But then there are other times where I've only ever ended 2 interviews early because it was just like, I'm not getting anywhere here. Stop wasting my time, Reese Witherspoon. Stop wasting my time, Stanley Tucci. And I left. I was like, thank you very much. My time is valuable too. So that's you have to have self-respect. Just because you're sucking up for the interview, you got to get the interview. And sometimes Vin Diesel may keep you waiting for 7 hours, but if you don't get the interview, you got no job. However, I'm not going to keep it a secret that Vin Diesel kept me waiting 7 hours, or Justin Timberlake kept me waiting so long I missed the flight out of Vegas to get home. Like, that's rude. I'm on time. Was I late today, Mark?
Nope, you were.
No, I'm never late.
You were on time and everything like that. Now, I will say that there are some great stories that are come the entertainment world that are fun stories to tell, because I'm going to mention 2 legends that came to Hayti, speaking of the Hayti Center and everything like that. Ruby Dee did her My One Good Nerve play and everything like that when she was living, and at the time, Ossie Davis was still living as well. So Ossie Davis actually surprised her by coming to the Hayti, and I think that was when Diane Pledger was there. So the Deltas might have been the sponsors of that particular event and everything. So he surprised her on their anniversary, because that's why she was doing the play, was on their anniversary date. So they were
a great couple. They were a classic couple.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely a classic couple. Like I said, I had the pleasure of seeing them in Winston at the National Black Theater Festival. I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of meeting Mickey Grant, but she was a great classical person as well. She considered me almost to be part of her family and everything like that. And she's the one that wrote like that, teamed up with Ted Turkle and some others in terms of being a writer and everything like that. But yeah, she was another amazing lady that was the good stories that are told. Now, we know there's some sad stories, because we also had a blues singer that got in trouble because of maybe not paying their child support. And we'll just leave it at that, and y'all can do the research as to who that may be or may not be and everything like that. But yeah, they got in trouble at one of the concerts. Andrea, what have been some of the people that you worked with in New York? Because I know you worked with folks in New York as well, and you mentioned Bill T. Jones. I was a big fan of Bill T. Jones, and of course, I was a big fan and considered him to be almost like a family friend as well as a mentor in some ways of Baba Chuck Davis. So, what was it like knowing Baba Chuck as well as Bill T. Jones, and who were some of the other people that you worked with in New York that Nelson might know?
Yeah, it's a beautiful atmosphere. I come from the modern dance. Oh, is that you, Nelson? A lot's going on there. I come from a modern dance background, and so it's a lot of independent artists. And I tell my students that sometimes you're looking for the bright, shiny thing or the big person who's out there, and actually your peers might be that person at this time in your life, in your generation. So don't discount those people there. So the people I worked with in Bill's company, when I was younger, before I danced in the company, one of my ambitions was to study. I wanted to study at the Martha Graham School, and I did. And they're celebrating their 100th anniversary. It's the oldest or the longest living company in the United States, the Martha Graham Company. So I had the fortune of studying at the Graham School when Martha Graham was still alive. And those dance company members, the doors would be closed where they rehearsed, and we would like line up with a little sliver in our eye just to watch how much of the rehearsal, how much can you see in a cracked door, or to watch them come out of the rehearsal room. It was just like angels had descended or something. Things like that. I studied at the Ailey School when Alvin Ailey was alive, and through a series of mishaps, my class schedule was kind of rearranged, and I had to take the very beginning classes when I was an advanced dancer, and it kind of hurt me, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do. But one day Mr. Ailey came in and sat in on my on a jazz class that I was taking, and those kinds of things are the stories, the things that other people can't say. Like I was in the room with Alvin Ailey, sitting there watching our class with Bernard Johnson, a famous jazz, old time jazz choreographer and dancer. So those are some of the things. We just lost a beautiful legend, Carmen de Lavalade. Judith Jamison was given an honorary doctorate at Duke, and I had a luncheon with Judith Jamison, and she recently passed away a few years ago. And she's from Philly too. She's from the same neighborhood I'm from, a couple blocks up in Germantown, and she danced with my dance teacher. So legacy in modern dance is so important to us because we move in circles where a lot of people don't know. And for instance, Baba Bradley Simmons just passed away last May, and he was in Broadway. He worked with Baba Chuck Olatunji. He was in Guys and Dolls. He worked with Eartha Kitt. I mean, he had this so well-rounded background. Anything you talk to him about in entertainment or the industry, Bradley would start to name 4 or 5 people that he worked with and that he knew or he knew of. So these like concentric circles, I feel like that's part of my legacy because I was close to him, he here at Duke and in the community. So I claim ownership. The next person that mentions Nelson's name, I'll be like, oh, Nelson and I, we go way back to Wednesday the 18th. We're
all this is doing, Andrea, is making me think you've got to come over for coffee because okay. I need to talk to you about Gwen Verdon. I need to talk to you about my father being the milkman in Frankfurt, Philadelphia. I grew up in Westchester, so degrees of separation.
You have a little Philly accent. You never lose it. The Appalachian still comes out.
I'll have a Coke and a hoagie.
We have to be in the right.
But probably just in cousins and everything like that. Hey, Nelson, just really quickly, you also got this book that I'm a fan of Mother Nature. I try to get out and enjoy it to some degree. And apparently, this magnificent Mr. and Miss Mabel is the story of two trees in a Harlem penthouse garden and everything like that. So I've got to learn more about this particular book and how the trees play a role in this particular book and everything like that. Because I'm a fan of Mother Nature, and we'll try to get out and enjoy some of the. I even got the Merlin app on my phone so that I can recognize what the birds are and everything like that. And actually, a fellow art friend of mine from DC who is very, very much involved in our arts community, Daryl Stover, is who turned me onto this, along with one of our past TV anchors, Anthony Wilson, who is now retired from television and everything like that. But they both turned me onto this app and everything like that. So tell me about this particular book.
Well, it's coming out. The Kindle version is available for pre-order now, but the book will be coming out next week. It's called The Magnificent Mr. and Mrs. Maple, and you do have to write about what you know, and it takes place on my garden terrace overlooking the Apollo Theater. And it's the love story of my two trees. And it is a children's book, but it's also, the theme of it is about what defines a family. And a family does not need to all live under the same roof. You can still be a loving family without always living together. And so it's not only a message for kids, but I find it's a very positive message for older folks who are facing relocation. So the book is coming out for Earth Day because of the plants, but I'm going to be reading it and sharing it with the very young and the very old. The foreword is actually written by New York Times gerontologist Carrie Bernight, and it's a great message. And people thought, oh, well, you write these rather racy books. Can you write a children's book? And yes, I can. I can do two things at the same time. And I'm very proud of the book, and it's for all ages. My Dancing Between the Raindrops books are for adults only, but the Magnificent Mr. and Maple is for everyone.
Speaking of books for everybody and everything along those lines, and this is for both of you, because I had another guest on a special edition of this show not that long ago and everything like that. And we were talking about the power of play. And I've got a friend, IPC, I Paint Creatures, and I worked with him on a troupe, like an audio troupe that was talking about the power of play and everything like that. And it seems like sometimes we've gotten away from that power of play and trying to push adults into being, push kids into being adults too quickly and everything like that. So I just wanted y'all's thoughts about the power of play and the importance of creativity, because then both of you are very much in the creative field. And I sometimes think that we don't do a good enough job of encouraging our kids to stay playful and to stay fun in their lives and everything like that. So I just wanted y'all's take on that.
My life is a playground. But that's been my approach to life for 62 and a half years. I just look at life as one big talk show, and we're all each other's guests. So if my life is framed by pop culture and television that I grew up with. So it's a very theatrical world in which I operate, and we're all co-stars.
Yeah, and imagination. I mean, that's one of the things that you can't teach someone to use their imagination. You can provide opportunities for that to happen, but you can't, get it into someone. And I have a magnificent imagination. I have to call it back sometimes. I'll just, be thinking of things, but giving people time to imagine, giving people time to not always have the answer. We're really in a response-driven society. You should always have the answer, the right answer, the trending answer. And if you don't, you can just automatically get it and be the person with the information. It's not knowledge and it's not wisdom, but you can call up the information in a second. And sometimes it's good to say, I don't know, or, kind of hypothesize or wonder is probably a better word, to wonder about things, or to speculate, or to make it up, or to lie a little bit. Those are the kinds of things that we should all have an opportunity to do, especially young people, or we're working with young people. We shouldn't be insistent that they get it and get it right, that they know it and they always know it. And we should be proud of people who say, I don't know, but I want to figure it out. I'll get in there with you and we'll do it together. We'll figure it out. We're not all experts all the time. So I think play, imagination, and just just having the wonderment of life. If you miss out on that, I mean, I love the name of your book, Nelson. I just love when you said the title, I hadn't thought that it would be about tree, and I'm a tree person. I'm definitely a tree hugging person. And the opera that I'm writing is about water, and it's about a little girl, and she knows that water is our survival, and so she goes on an adventure, a journey, and there's a crocodile that flies and goes through the air, and she goes through different landscapes on the tail of the crocodile, and then dives into the water and comes back up on the Gullah coast and dances a ring shout. So that was just in my imagination. I thought, what would it feel like? I've touched an alligator before. I have a photo of that in West Africa, in Ghana. And I thought, what would it feel like to really hold on and go for a ride? Like, what would that feel like? So imagination.
Yeah, imagination is very important and everything like that. What advice would you give to folks that are thinking about that they want to get into the creative field, whether it's dance or whether it's being a entertainment reporter and all along those lines? So what advice would you give to folks that are thinking that they want to get into one of these fields and everything like that? Because like you said, everybody thinks that it's easy, and we all know that show business is a business, but a lot of people. I remember a late friend, he just passed not that long ago. He talked about the notion of people being very good at the show aspect, but maybe not all that great in the business aspect. I just wonder, what advice would you give to folks other than maybe learning about the business side of show business?
Oh, we touched on it earlier, and I will flag this only because I have another interview in exactly 16 minutes. But my answer to that guy, so I need to skedaddle. But I was going to say, one of the most important things for any job is punctuality. You need to. It may not be fun to be like I just think like Vin Diesel, chronic late person. It's a terrible sign of disrespect to be late to somewhere, and I think that is important for any job. Show up on time, be prepared. I didn't know how to be an entertainment reporter when I started out, but I showed up on time. I listened. I did my work. I worked hard, and that's how you learn anything. That's what you have to do when you go to school. You can't go to a dance class, Andrea, and show up late. I don't think they'd welcome you in late, would they? You missed the whole combination. You wouldn't know how to do the dance if you show up late.
Yeah, that's very true and everything like that. So one of the things I get everybody to do, so I want to do that before you have to leave. And I've got about another 20, 30 minutes for the whole show. So I'll spend part of that with Andrea and everything like that. But I get all my guests to give their message of positivity and their message of hope. And that's just kind of what I get every guest to do, no matter who they are and everything like that. So if there's a message of positivity that you would like to share before having to skedaddle to your other interview, and if you can tell folks how they can reach you and get in touch with the books that you've got.
You're very kind. Thank you so much. And I'm the easiest person in the world to find, Nelson Aspen. You can find me at nelsonaspen.com, on my social media at Nelson Aspen. And Andrea, you must stay in touch because we have much to discuss.
Mark will help us.
Yes, absolutely. But my advice or my message of hope is, and I used it this is a saying I used when I was an aerobics instructor, and it applies to all aspects of life. Bodies in motion, stay in motion. Keep moving. I mean, it applies to everything, whether it's your brain, your body, your career, your love life. Keep it moving. Bodies in motion, stay in motion.
Motion, beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. You definitely have to stay in motion and everything like that. I do have to teach you before you get out, because I also saw that some of your interviews were with soap opera stars, and I'm not going to lie. When I was a kid, I did watch the wedding of Luke and Laura and everything like that, as well as some of the other soap operas that existed. And yes, I was a fan of some of the nighttime soap operas like Falcon's Crest and Dynasty and other things like that. So what was it like talking to those soap opera stars? Because I do know that you had the pleasure of interviewing some of them as well.
Well, I grew up on soap operas. That was my first job. My first television job was on Search for Tomorrow. And then I went on to Another World and One Life to Live. So I went through all the New York soaps until I exhausted them. And then when I went to LA, now there are no more soaps left in New York, which is very sad. But I'll leave you with this bit of trivia, since you like Luke and Laura and the wedding on General Hospital. My friend Tom Racina wrote the Luke and Laura storyline. He's got great stories about Elizabeth Taylor when she guest starred at the wedding. But one of the interesting things, Tom Racina had a house in Palm Springs, and his pool boy was a young farm boy named Brad Pitt.
Oh,
And
wow.
Brad Pitt wanted to be an actor, and he dreamed of being an actor. So Tom, when he was a writer on Another World, wrote a part for Brad Pitt. And Brad was in 2 or 3 episodes of Another World. The producers couldn't stand him. They thought he had terrible skin. They thought he was a terrible actor. You're never going to make it, kid. And there's a lesson for you right there. Because the next thing you know, he was on Dallas. And after that, Thelma and Louise. And after that, come on. So there's no bigger movie star in the world than Brad Pitt. But he started out as a pimply-faced pool boy, and there's you're not going to be right for every job, but you're right for some job. You just got to go out there and get it.
Yeah, definitely. I know you got to get to other interviews, so I'm not going to hold you up. But I started this show with asking you how I could get to be involved in the Golden Globe. So do you have any advice for me as to how I can get on a production team with the Golden Globes or the Oscars or one of those other shows? Or maybe
you just have to apply for credentials. The worst they can say is no.
That is true. The worst they can say is no. And I have a friend that teases me to this day because he says I don't use my press credentials enough in terms of applying, because he sometimes will say, Mark, you know that so-and-so is coming to town. Why don't you just apply for a press credential? You've had different jobs, whether it's been in newspapers or now with Pod TV. And I'm going like, but that's too easy. So sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot. So I know that I've shot myself in the foot a couple of times as well. So I've got to just go ahead and, like you said, apply for those credentials.
You can do it. I know you can.
Well, I look forward to it. Hopefully we'll get you back on as well on this, and I'll definitely put you in touch with Andrea and everything like that. But you've been a delightful interview, and I know you got to get to the other one as well. But I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we can have some further conversations, and you can also meet.
I hope so. You're a host with the most. You're a true host. A host makes his guests feel welcome, and that's just what you've done.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's what I try to do with the online dinner party, is to make guests feel as welcome as possible. So I definitely appreciate that praise.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
I
love you guys.
Okay.
Right.
Take care, Nelson.
Take it easy, Nelson.
I love the background. Like now I see it, the online dinner party, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah, a friend of mine created that for me and everything like that. So for those that don't know you, because the Pod TV network is a global network, so you shared a little bit about that, but how did you go from being a North Carolina person to a Philly person to back to being a North Carolina person? So how did you make these various transitions in life? And did you always know you were going to be an entertainer? Because as long as I've known you, you've always had that effervescent personality and always looked like you probably knew you were going to be a entertainer of some sort or another, even when you were a kid and everything like that.
I mean, I did know. I felt it in my bones, and I always felt like dance was the place I belonged. It's kind of, asking a bird, like, when did you know you would be a bird, or a butterfly? When did you know you would be a butterfly? I always knew that since I was very young. But in Philadelphia, I did what other kids do. I went to school. And maybe what all other kids didn't do is I went to ballet lessons after school. I did gymnastics, I did swimming, I did piano, but the things start to fall away as your studies get more difficult in high school and your time is a little more limited. And ballet lessons, well, we did other types of dancing, but that was the consistent thing. I danced at a small school called Germantown Dance Theater. My teacher, Jean Williams, she taught all the styles of dance. We did ballet, jazz, tap, clogging, point, and her jazz had a little bit of Catherine Dunham technique in it, which I learned later when I did some of those exercises. I was like, Jean was incorporating this. I don't know where she was getting it, and a lot of musical theater. So she kind of was choreographed the musical theaters for the local colleges. So as I got older, I did the summer stock theater productions, No Nanette, Sweet Charity, sort of character. I was the dancer always. And somewhere around college, when you start to stop having other people form your identity, my own identity started to form as a modern dancer. And that was when I was introduced to a second time to the Graham style of dance. And I had it in Jean's school a little bit. I had some at Philadelphia. And then in college, with a teacher, Judith Leifer.
Mhm.
And it was the musical theater classes had, maybe 30 students, and we're all competing and we're trying to wear the like highest cut, lowest cut, be the one in the front, get the attention. And the modern dance classes would be maybe 6 students, and there was no music. The teacher had a drum, and she would hit the drum, and you would move on the drum, boom, and you do something emotional, boom, boom. And that's where like life changed for me, in that kind of environment where I was really called on to produce from within. And I moved to New York very early. I knew when I got home to Philadelphia, I had a couple boxes from college, and I worked with Norman Walker at Adelphi University, very like stringent environment. And I knew that I was coming right back to New York when I graduated. So I never unpacked my boxes. I just took a magic marker and like put my friend's address in New York and shipped it was like 3 boxes and a suitcase and $350. I paid for rent, and I moved right to New York because I wanted to study. I think I was thinking about being on stage, but I was still thinking about studying. And when you asked Nelson, about advice and things like that,
Right.
there's a distinct difference in my world between doing the thing and studying the thing. So
Right.
if you say, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a singer, I want to be a writer, that means every day you are at some place in your day dedicated to the study of that thing, whether it means reading someone else's work, writing your own work,
Mhm.
Looking at something online, going to the library, going to see a movie that's not available on streaming. Every day you're doing the studying work. And I was I still am very studious. I don't have a copy of it, but I wrote a chapter in a book that just came out, or I don't have a copy here in my office. It's the Oxford Handbook of Black Dance Studies. And if you're familiar with the Oxford Handbooks, they're like 800 pages thick. And I have a chapter in there. And I started writing the chapter in 2020. COVID kind of put a lot of projects on pause.
Right.
Then I was asked to rework it and make it longer. And then an editor gives you comments and suggestions. I had photos, I had to get the permissions. So you go through this process where you're almost asked to study yourself, where you have to know your own work well enough to rewrite it, correct it, get it into the shape. And when the publication, it's the editor is Thomas DeFrance. When the book came out, my mind was blown. I think I'm chapter 36 or 38, which lets you know there are 38 authors before me and a few after me. And to see my work in the context of all of those great, brilliant Black minds is just breathtaking. That was something I had never imagined. You asked us about that, like imagining yourself as an entertainer, but I don't know if I saw myself as a published author in this kind of way in the field of dance, of Black dance.
Yeah, I had that pleasure recently myself. A friend of mine who's a LinkedIn influencer, he and his, I think, a new lady and everything like that, but they wrote a book. It's Brian Schulman. He can definitely find him all over LinkedIn and everything like that. But they had a group of folks that they were doing these different shows on LinkedIn. I think one was Shout Out Saturday and What's Up Wednesdays and everything. But it was people from around the world that were kind of like sharing their thoughts and giving each other positivity and hope and everything along those lines. And he asked me to write a chapter and everything like that. So as of not earlier this year, but early the last year, so early part of 2025, I became a published author. I think it's the second time because a friend of mine that I interviewed him, Van Doren Hennon, who's a local artist and everything like that, a state artist, but I think he's down in Winston-Salem and everything in that space. He published one of my interviews of him, so that technically I'm an author of that as well. But this was a chapter that I wrote myself. I think it was me and maybe 20 or 25 other authors as well. It might have even been more than that, but I was the chapter. And my chapter you would actually enjoy, because it was I am very close to my own family, but I was talking about the soul family and how we sometimes have family members that aren't our birth families, but they can be equally important in our development and our life. So I wrote this essay, and I think I might have even mentioned Baba Chuck in that, about people that I consider to be part of my soul family. So that was what the chapter was about, with how our family isn't just our born family, but also the family that we identify with. Some people would call it our tribe.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's a different, another area, but one that I embrace, writing as well as performing. But yeah, I think it was in there since I was a kid. I wasn't really like a show off or anything, but I think I was the person who was doing something interesting that would call people's attention. And that's kind of one of my trademarks, is like, I might not be the most crazy out there, but what I'm doing is something that will, like, I have this way of calling you in, bringing people toward what I'm doing. And some of that is storytelling, being able to tell a good story with movement, with words, with music. But some of it, I would have to sit down and think about it a little bit more. My mother's good at analyzing or describing the things that I do. I guess she should be. There are three of us. I have a brother and a sister, and she can tell you, all of our traits and all about us and things like that. But
that makes a lot of sense and everything. How important do you think collaboration is? Because I know that you collaborated. Women at Work is a collaboration piece, as far as I'm concerned, and I know that definitely Nina Freelon has done some collaboration pieces. I have some other people here in the area, including Mike Wiley, who will be at the center on Friday and everything like that. But how important do you think collaboration is in the artistic endeavors?
Very important. And speaking of Mike, every time we see each other, we threaten to work together, and we just haven't been able to make it happen. So that's in the cards. That's in the stars somewhere. But in 2012, I created a work called The Amazing Adventures of Grace May B. Brown. And it's May, middle initial B, Brown, but it also Grace may be a brown-skinned girl. Right. And I collaborated with Shauna Tucker for the music on that. Pamela Bond, who's at NCCU and a costume and also fashion, but costume designer, and Julia Price, flautist. And collaboration is really what expands us. It teaches you, it frees up some of the space. If we try to be too much and do too much, you only have so much capacity. And when you lean out of some of those things, it frees up capacity in another area or in the area you're working in. Another person on the Grace May B. Brown project was Heather Williams, author, writer. Her first name is Andrea Heather, and she wrote a book about enslaved people and the writings that helped them find their ancestors and family members during emancipation. Wow. And she's also a quilter, and her quilters tell stories, and the quilts were the background for my piece. We took pictures and used them as videos. So all of this color and the piecing together. In this piece, the opera that I'm doing, it's called The Magic of the Water. I'm collaborating with Atiba Rory, Atiba percussion, right. And his nephew Allende Lewis is playing on the piece. Michelle Grant Murray, my good friend, is the choreographer, and we did a writing retreat. We went to the beach and just wrote, and we used some writing prompts, and then we, looked at each other's writing, and that helped me create the libretto. And I have a wonderful conductor, Sybil Haskins. She's at NCCU now. She was at Hillside. She conducts marching and concert bands. So she has that capacity to see, multiple sections. and I can't name everyone because I'll go wrong.
Yeah,
Lauren
just somebody
Forrest,
that's
Oregon
always
Burgess, and but when all the people are in the room, I wouldn't say I'm overwhelmed because I believe in the power of what we do, but it feels so mystical and so magical when all of us are in the room together. I'm also going to be working with United Strings of Color, 5 young high school recently graduated pre-professional professional string players, and they are magnificent. Oh, they were at the Hayti. They did Women at Work. Well, once the soloist Sophia, and then I asked her about making the connection with their director Margaret Partridge and the whole quintet. So we'll start rehearsing with the musicians in a couple of weeks. But it is just an amazing experience to be with all the people in the room doing what I could definitely not do by myself. So I encourage people to look for your peers. You know, if don't be shy, ask people. Sometimes you'd be surprised that people are looking for other like-minded spirits to come along and want to be in their, orbit. So don't be shy about saying, hey, would you like to work together?
You can't be shy and everything like that, because I'm a big fan of collaboration, not just because of the work at Hayti, but also my dad being a well-known artist, Jim Lee and everything like that, and a number of other people that I've been working with, and even mom having worked in the philanthropy field and everything like that. So I'm a big fan of collaboration. I will say that sometimes we also have to be cautious, because sometimes people will try to hijack your dreams and everything like that. But so that's the only thing that I have.
Good people in, you really have to that's a thing about, taking your time, knowing people, feeling that it's right. For sure. Right. You don't want that negativity in the room, because it could just, be a downhill. That's one of the things I think about being older and maturing in the field is my judgment of character. It's not always on spot, but it's much better than when I was younger. I mean, that's something that you develop. Maybe some people just always have it, but it was something that I think I'm learning to develop. And my value system, like what's important to me. It's important to me how people communicate.
Right.
It's important to me that people are listeners as well as contributors and talkers. It's important to me how people relate to each other when I'm not looking or when I'm not involved, that they are good to each other. So things like that. You mentioned Women at Work. This year we're doing, my website is soloworks.com, and that's spelled SOULOWORKS. And on the website, you can find the Women at Work registration link. We're doing a series of classes on the 28th at Duke University in the Rubenstein Arts Center, and you need to be registered. And we're having, a yoga class with Kiki in the morning. And then Kim McCrae is doing a writer's workshop, life writing. Marissa Melvin is going to teach fundamentals of salsa. Ife Presswood is going to teach hip hop, and I'm going to teach dance and shakere. So you can come in, take one of the classes, or spend the whole day. And that's going to be our Women at Work, because we have to acknowledge women's work during the month of March, all year long. We have to acknowledge each other in this community. It's a rich, thriving community in Durham and the Triangle area. Black women, women of color, women all over the world. So Women at Work, I didn't want to lose the momentum since we're not producing the showcase, but I wanted to keep that momentum. And I love being able to provide space or facilitate space for young performers, teachers, intergenerational, multi-generational, interdisciplinary work. Put us in the room together and something exciting is bound to happen.
Yep, and hopefully it can come back to Hayti next year. I know we had a meeting yesterday at the center with some of the staff and everything like that, and it looks like it's going to be a effort to bring more arts and arts-driven projects into the center and everything like that. So I think there'll be a new form and stuff that'll be out there available later on this month and everything like that. So it does look like they're going to be trying to have a lot of collaborative works that will be taking place including creating what will amount to almost like a cohort-like system within the system of HI. And that's without the new director, but we're hoping to have a new director in by May and everything like that. But this is something that May has put together, and I was actually pleased with what I saw, because it sounds like it's going to be more of a cohort type of environment where all the cohorts will work together and we'll be able to do some collaboration work. And
that'll be wonderful. Well, that'll be one. The programming there is always so strong, and so much goes into it. So much thought goes into it. Our community is where I'm really invested. I've worked nationally and internationally and still do, but most of my work, especially being full-time professor at a university, it really means that you're here. You're of the land, you're of the sidewalks, you're of the stores. You know, I see people downtown is, you know, where I want to do my shopping, or, you know, so this community is thriving and rich, and I want to see other people do I want to do my work for sure, but I want to see us kind of I just want to see the whole atmosphere running, not just my atmosphere, but the whole atmosphere. And I'm linked to many of the same people that are at the Hayti, whether I'm there or not. So I still see reflections of myself, and people who interest me and who I care about, you know, are there.
You know, no doubt about that. I know that I consider you to be like almost a sister-like figure and everything like that in my own life and everything like that, and everything in that space. But I also know that, and I also consider your husband to be like a brother-like figure and all in that way. But definitely, I consider both of y'all to be part of the family. But one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised by, because I'm considered the staff historian, and I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, that the Duke players came, and I can honestly say that quite a few of them, and this was back when I think Tony was there, so it wasn't the one that just went off into the NBA, but it was like maybe 2 years ago and everything. But it was during the pandemic that they actually bought some items from Hanif. So they went down after I gave my talk, and I think there might have been some other people, maybe even Mark Anthony Neal, that was part of that as well. But they went down there, and I want to say the majority of the players, including some of the white players, bought the material from Hanif and everything like that. So I know that some of our even Duke players are trying to get involved in the community. I even remember the days of Brian Davis and and Grant Hill being involved in the creation of some of the apartments that are here in Durham as well, and everything like that. So it is good to see both Duke and NCCU players involved in the community development.
Yeah, and visibility is key. You know, people have a tendency to look in a particular direction, or the direction they're accustomed to, and to kind of say, you know, things are happening over here, and don't just look once, look twice, check in, you know, make this a part of your regular. So having the Hayti, you shouldn't go to one event and then feel like you've done your special, you know, thing. You should go back. I love this idea of a cohort, because it kind of avoids the one and done syndrome. And it also creates a sense of co-support that we need in terms of, you know, talking about collaboration. No one wants to be hung out there alone. No one wants to be figuring it out alone. And you always need mentors and people to talk to ask about. And that, for me, as you mature, it's harder to have mentors because you're further along in age and career. And so there are fewer people, you know, the ancestors are before us. Right. But I find mentorship also in young people, asking them, you know, their point of view, their opinion, how they do things. They're so savvy with the, you know, technology and the internet. And I'm not. That, you know, Nelson was really saying about be on time. I'm so punctual, like in my life, 10 minutes late, you know, early is on time for me. I couldn't find the link. I'm like, this is driving me crazy. I know I'm supposed to be on this program. Where's the link? So, you know, that's just me. And my non-iPhone having self, getting the technology together. But my students, young people, will, when I ask them a question, they get to work on it. They're like so into it that they'll give me, do it like this or this and that, or, oh, you just have to look at these 3 little dots up here and you pull that down and you pull it, and they're my wisdom. They're my mentors and my wise people.
No, and I'm a big fan of that. I think that's some of the mistakes that some of our political leaders have made, is not listening to the wisdom of our young people. Even some of our PACs haven't always listened to the young voices. But yeah, I'm a big fan of listening to the young voices. There's definitely wisdom with age, but there's also wisdom with youth and what they are learning as they are developing and everything like that. So I'm a big fan of that notion. I mean, like, I've learned a lot, even certain games, from my 2 nephews, as I don't have any kids of my own, but I've learned from just having conversations with them. And one of them is going to try to be an activist lawyer. So he's actually looking at school. And right now, I think UNCG is leading the hunt, even though Central may get a call, or NC State or some of the other schools as well. I don't think he applied to Duke, but I know that but he's looking at being a lawyer, and his younger brother, there's only a year apart from them, will be going next year in engineering and everything like that. So they've already got some good ideas of good fields that they want to go into.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'm definitely proud of them, everything like that. Well, we're going to wrap up. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you, as well as with Nelson and everything like that. But I will give you the same opportunity that I gave him. If you can tell folks how they can reach you and get in touch with you if they're interested in the Women at Work, you mentioned that earlier, but also if they're interested in learning more about some of your other projects as well, and also any message of positivity that you want to share with the global audience that is part of this Pod TV network.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, the website, soloworks.com, SOULOWORKS, and I have a calendar there. I'm on Instagram, and it's women, WIMMIN_@_work, and a sunflower will come up. That's my trademark. So Women at Work is my Insta, and SoloWorks on Facebook. Don't ask me how. You figure it out how to find SoloWorks on Facebook, some kind of how. But my words of to share of encouragement and positivity are similar to Nelson's. And I write this on cards to my students when they graduate or anything important. Continue to continue. Mm. That's the key, is not to be knocked down or knocked out when something doesn't go as expected. Continue to continue, and you'll find that there's magic beyond that. There's magic in that second step you take when you think you should have stopped. Continue to continue.
Continue to continue. That's some great advice and everything along those lines. You mentioned sunflowers. One of my neighbors, she's from Brazil and everything like that. She has grown sunflowers. I don't think she grew any this past spring and everything like that, but she grew them for several years, and it is a wonderful plant and everything like that. I used to love seeing them grow, because she was on the first floor and they would grow up to the second floor, because it's 2-floor apartments and everything like that, and all along those lines. But what drew you to sunflowers? That was my quick side question.
It's so bright and cheery. I have them around my office, and because I love them, people give them to me, or little things that have sunflowers on them. I love the color yellow, and the warmth of the sun. I'm a warm-blooded person. I'm from Philadelphia, but I need to be in a warm climate or a tropical climate. But I just think that sense of hope and the universality of them, that you can find them in so many different places, and they're so hardy. They grow, they get as tall as a human being, and that giant head and their sustenance, the plant, the seeds and all of that. But they just call my heart. I'm a flower person. I love flowers. That's my thing. I love birds too. They kind of go together. Yeah. But thanks for that question. That I'm smiling talking about sunflowers. Here I am, I'm cheering myself up.
Sunflowers are very cheerful and everything like that. I always play at the end a commercial about the importance of the educators and all along those lines. Well, not all the time, but most of the time. And it talks about not just educators in the sense of being teachers like you or university professors, but also those that are support staff, whether that's the cafeteria worker, whether that's the janitor, whether that's the guidance counselor, and all along those lines. So before I play this commercial, which will be the thing to get us on out of here, what is your thoughts about the importance of education and education support?
Well, education is key. I told you about my father asking me always about teaching. I have 2 master's degrees and a PhD in dance. And my grandfather told me, never, if there's something ahead of you in the thing that you love to do, don't stop. So that's what I would encourage other people to look ahead and don't stop. Don't be deterred. Don't be fooled into thinking that, you got it. There's always something more, whether it's formal education, whether it's mentoring by someone near you. Everything doesn't happen in the university system, but if you have an opportunity to study, if you have an opportunity to find a mentor, take that opportunity. We're sort of in a everyone do everything yourself, DIY. In terms of learning and knowing, but there's always someone who has some pearls of wisdom to drop for you. So I would say gather them up with both hands. Don't miss an opportunity to learn and to ask questions and to know.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Going to play this one PSA and everything like that, and then get myself on out of here. I got to get some dinner for myself and all on those lines, speaking of the online dinner party and everything like that. But I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, as well as the conversation with Nelson, and hope to see you back in the near future.
Okay, Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the honor of being here with you.
No problem. So right now, let's check out this commercial and get on out of here.
All righty.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold.